He released his chain dome, bearing the brunt of the hellish blue flames with his demonic, crimson body as he charged at the clone controlling the fire. But the third clone met his charge head-on and slammed his forefists at him violently.
In his demonic form, Naruto had even been able to overpower Mount Lady's gigantification. But All for One's clone managed to stop him in his tracks with his might.
"Don't get in my way," he shouted as he blocked the clone's massive fists with his fox tails, and the spear-tipped golden chains coming from his back impaled the clone in the chest, killing it instantly. Despite that he killed one of AFO's clones, Naruto's worry and anxiety were increasing with every second that passed, with him being unable to close the distance and shake Izuku awake.
If Ao gets Izuku's quirk, we're all finished. The ground underneath his feet transformed into a swamp, and 10 mud hands grabbed him by his arms, legs, and 6 tails to drag him into the depths below. With an aggressive yank of his tails, the mud hands broke, and Naruto used his golden chains to grab onto the solid ground beyond the edge of the swamp created by AFO's clones, pulling himself out. "Izuku!" Naruto screamed again, hoping against all odds that his friend would hear his voice and come back to his senses.
"What a troublesome fellow you are," one of the remaining 2 clones said in anger. "Don't you see it's hopeless? Once I get my hands on one for all, no one will be able to stop me."
As his 4 hands lit up with wind and blue flames again, the clone spoke. "I could have killed you anytime I wanted, Uzumaki Naruto. With my decay quirk, one touch is all it would take for me to kill you. The only reason you're still alive is because I want your chains. Give me your quirk, boy. Surrender, and I will let you live. Your quirk is valuable, but not as valuable as one for all. If you give me no choice, I will put you down like a dog. This is my last offer." Just as the clone finished his words, a white blur came down from the sky, and a familiar shout reached Naruto's ears. "Luna fall!"
It was Mirko's most powerful super move, a downward kick that used the entire weight of her body and all the momentum that she gained from moving at the speed of sound.
Scream of pain came from the original All for One as the spear-like bones in his arm shattered from her kick, bringing him out of his mental world just as he was about to completely overwhelm Midoriya Izuku and steal his quirk. He had been moments away from fulfilling his most ardent desire, his obsession.
Mirko had yet to even land on the ground with her feet after breaking AFO's arm when his other 3 hands suddenly wrapped around the leg she used to kick her, not leaving her even a second to escape.
His heart filled with rage. All for One hoisted her up by the leg and slammed her into the ground, repeatedly and savagely.
"Mirko!" Naruto shouted, but another air cannon and blue flame combination blasted him several hundred meters away, throwing him out of the Imperial Gardens and making him leave human-sized holes in 2 skyscrapers before his body finally came to a stop.
He spat a mouthful of blood as he struggled to stand up to his feet.
But despite his internal injuries, he broke into a sprint, rushing back to the battlefield. In his craze, he unknowingly started running on all 4s, resembling an actual fox rather than a human, and a 7th tail grew out of his back.
"Rumi! Rumi!" he shouted, his voice a mixture between that of a human and a beast.
When he finally arrived at the devastated Imperial Gardens again, Izuku had come back to his senses and was holding an unconscious and bleeding Mirko wrapped in his black whip. He had strapped the rabbit girl to his back as he did his utmost to avoid and dodge All for One's ruthless attacks.
But Naruto didn't even register FO in his remaining clone, or the fact that Izuku was at the end of his wits, about to be overpowered by All for One and his double.
The only thing registering in his mind was the river of blood flowing from Mirko's cracked skull, staining her white hair crimson, and the fact that he could not hear the sound of Rumi's breathing or her heartbeats.
Looking at Naruto with her red eyes sparkling in excitement, she said,
"What you say? Do you wanna tag along? We're gonna have so much fun. And you'll get to see a pro hero in action with your own eyes too. Win-win if you ask me, Tilda."
"Anyway, Tiger Bunny, I actually got this nickname in high school during my delinquent days. What? No way, Naruto said while laughing, and Mirko laughed together with him too. I'm serious. I sometimes miss those days. I used to love crushing other district school gangs and making them call me Aneki. At first he thought she was joking, but the joy he could hear in her laughter was a bit too pure to not be real. I don't remember the last time someone gave me a piggyback. Go! Go! She said and giggled happily. But are you okay? Your heart is beating as if to jump out of your chest, she said in fake worry, as if she wasn't aware of what effect her posture would have on a teenage boy like him. Please don't tease me, Mirko-san, he said meekly. Your reactions are adorable, she said with a snicker, patting the top of his head. Am I your friend Naruto? She asked, her voice only a whisper this time. How is that a question? Of course you are. She smiled. It wasn't one of her usual teasing grins this time. It was a pure, happy smile. Mirko, could you give me an answer, please? Rumi, she said quietly. From now on, call me Rumi. Is that a yes? He said, his voice betraying how hopeful he was. Standing up from her chair, Mirko rose on her tippy toes to press a soft kiss on his cheek. That's all you're going to get for now, she said coyly as she looked up at him. You're not good at pouting. It won't work on me, he said, inwardly amused by her act. Strange, Era-chan told me pouting is super effective on you. Outside of his will, he snorted in amusement. Well, if that doesn't work, maybe this will. As she said those words, she took another gulp of beer and then, catching him completely by surprise, she grabbed him by the collar of his sweatshirt and covered his lips in an open-mouthed kiss. Finally home, Naruto muttered, when he and his father appeared in front of their home's entrance door. I know you're tired, but hold on. It's almost over, Minato said in encouragement, patting him on the shoulder.
Naruto nodded wordlessly and went ahead to open the door. Before he could touch the door handle, the door suddenly opened, and someone jumped into his arms. It was Mirko.
At that moment, in the blink of an eye, his life with Rumi over the past 2 years all flashed through his mind. Whether it was his previous or current life, he had never loved another girl as much as her. He was going to marry her. They were going to make a family together. They were going to She's dead. All for One and Izuku both stopped fighting and distanced themselves from each other, as a feeling of danger like never before washed over them both.
A roar that couldn't have come from a human burst from Naruto's chest, and his body deformed like that of an abomination, almost like a Nomu, as it increased in size explosively.
Izuku was left dumbstruck when All for One and his double were suddenly covered by a black ooze.
All for One was going to run away, teleporting with his warp quirk. But AFO's warp quirk was cancelled as a massive crimson tail, much thicker and longer than a 16-wheeler truck, slammed into him and his clone. The clone exploded into a puddle of mud upon impact, and the original was blasted away with such strength that his body left sonic booms behind.
Izuku felt his knees grow weak as an enormous creature came to his side. It no longer bore any resemblance to a human being. Crimson red and tall enough to rival a skyscraper, the creature looked just like the legendary nine-tailed fox from the myths. The enormous fox appeared to be sniffing him for a moment before saying in a very deep voice,
Call Naruto's father. The girl can still be saved. Saying that, the gigantic fox made a huge leap towards the ocean, in the direction in which he had blasted AFO away. Despite the ultimate combination of quirks that AFO had used to turn his body into that of a monster, Kyuubi's tail strike had pulverized one leg and 2 of his forearms and crushed half of his internal organs as well. All for One had barely managed to swim up from the depths of the ocean and was in process of regenerating his body when Kyuubi's massive body landed on top of the water with a massive splash, raising enormous waves.
Stay away, beast. All for One screamed, aiming one of the still working two hands from the left side of his body at the fox. A sphere of light gathered around his hand. The accumulation of energy was so intense that the space in its vicinity appeared to be distorted.
It was one of AFO's most powerful quirks, the same quirk that he had used to defeat Gigantomachia in the past with only one hit. It was so powerful that even AFO's own body, which was strengthened by dozens of body-enhancing quirks, could not withstand its recoil. He was going to sacrifice an arm to cast that attack.
But he had no choice. His intuition was telling him that anything less than that wouldn't leave a scratch on the titanic monster in front of him. Heavy, payload, impure beam. All for One's arm was obliterated as a beam of energy thicker than his own body exploded forth, catching the enormous fox in full. Even as the world went white, blinding QB and the drones that were filming their battle from a distance, All for One let out a pained laugh.
The blinding light coming from the energy beam's explosion didn't affect him because he had no eyes. Therefore, he could see the result of his attack just fine with his other sensory quirks. He had gone as far as to sacrifice an arm for the sake of killing the beast, but it had not been enough. A few patches of burnt fur were all that All for One's most powerful attack had to show for it. Kyuubi was left virtually unharmed.
I did all I could. You win, monster, All for One said in a voice of defeat. QB didn't deign him with a verbal answer. 2 rows of terrifying teeth longer than humans were tall were revealed as he opened his mouth and sank his fangs into All for One's body.
However, at the last moment, despite feeling his body getting torn apart by the massive fox's jaws, All for One's appearance of defeat vanished as he put his sole remaining hand on Kyuubi's fangs and shouted,
"Decay."
All for One burst into laughter as Kyuubi's front teeth decayed from his touch, and it started spreading to the rest of his body too, but his laughter died in his throat when he realized that the decay suddenly stopped spreading any further. It was only when 2 spear-tipped golden chains impaled what was left of his already mutilated body that AFO understood why. The giant fox was still Naruto and the golden chains were his adamantine sealing chains, the ones that had stopped his telekinesis, and now his decay too. They were Uzumaki Naruto's anti-quirk quirk. No, no, All for One screamed as he choked on his blood.
He tried to activate his numerous quirks, all of them, but none of them were answering his call.
I am All for One. I am the Lord of Crime. He had lived for centuries. His plans had led to All Might's death, and he had defeated the government of Japan too. He had single-handedly taken control of a country.
I can't die here.
He had been only a few seconds away from obtaining One for All again. With One for All, he would have become the most powerful man in the world. The whole world was his to conquer. It was his for the taking.
Not now. Not after all these years.
However, suspended by the adamantine sealing chains that had impaled him in the chest, All for One could do nothing but roar in helpless rage and despair.
QB didn't eat him. He held AO by the chains in front of his eyes, watching unblinkingly as life seeped out of his body. Finally, the self-proclaimed symbol of evil, the Demon Lord, drew his last breath. All for One was dead. Chapter 51. Epilogue. Several days passed since the fateful battle in Tokyo between the pro-heroes Resistance and the Lord of Crime, All for One.
The beginning of the battle went off without a hitch, and it appeared as though the pro-heroes were going to have an overwhelming, one-sided victory against All for One. But that lasted only until Lady Nagant's bullet killed Eraserhead. Without Aizawa's erasure quirk, the rest of the pro-heroes stood no chance anymore.
As the saying goes, when whales fight, a shrimp's back is broken. Knowing that they would only die a meaningless death if they got caught between his, Izuku, and Afo's fight, Naruto asked his father to teleport the other heroes away, to safety. Up until that moment, the world at large had not been aware of what was going on in Tokyo. But once Eraserhead was assassinated, and All for One brought out the big guns, the various mass media outlets immediately took notice of the massive explosions and sent their drones to film the incident from a distance.
The battle that followed was one for the ages. Izuku's heart and grit, All for One's limitless stock of quirks and his immeasurable strength, and Uzumaki Naruto's inhuman combat ability were all showcased in the fight. Nonetheless, the millions of people who were watching the live transmission forgot about all of that when Uzumaki Naruto lost control of his quirk.
Kyuubi no Kitsune. It was a well-known myth not only in Asia but even in Europe and North America. But nobody had ever taken that myth at face value. After all, it was just that, a myth.
Alas, when the titanic, crimson-furred monster fox with 9 tails appeared in the ruined gardens of the Imperial Palace, only shock, terror, and awe remained. It was a beast like nothing anyone had ever seen, like something out of this world. Even the largest land-walking creatures from the Mesozoic era did not come close in size. The 9-tailed fox was simply humongous.
His fox ears twitched as the noise made by a large crowd of people shook him awake. Where am I? Opening his eyes and taking in his surroundings, Naruto realized that he was home, inside his bedroom. Why is it so noisy? What's going on?
A dull headache throbbed in the depths of his skull.
Momentarily, he could not recall his most recent memories. His bones groaned in protest when he got out of bed and went to the window.
On his way there, his eyes fell on the full-body mirror on the door of his wardrobe. He froze in his tracks, startled.
He appeared to be fine. There were no visible wounds, bruises, or any bandages wrapped around his body. What startled him was the number of tails on his back. He did a double take. Picking up his golden foxtails, he started counting them one by one. 7, 8, 9. When did I get 9 tails? Did my quirk awaken again? What the hell happened? Leaving the matter of his tails aside for the moment, he went to the window and peeked through the blinders outside. It was his family home in Jacksonville, Florida, United States. However, the quiet and chic suburb had been turned upside down as the streets and alleys all around his house were cordoned off, with dozens of police cars and SWAT teams surrounding it and many more people crowded around them.
No, the police are not surrounding us. They're protecting us, he thought when he noticed the fact that all the law enforcement personnel at the scene were standing with their backs to his home and facing the crowd instead.
Those people don't look like it's out for our blood either. So what the hell happened? What are they here for? The harder he tried to remember, the more his headache worsened. It was to the point where he got dizzy and fell down to his knees, gripping his head with his hands in agony. When the pain seemed to increase beyond what he was capable of bearing with, it was as if a dam broke and all his memories rushed back to him, hitting him like a torrent. Principal, Nezu's plan, and the team of pro heroes. The past few weeks of doing unpaid hero work in Japan. He and Izuku attacking Detnerat and killing Redestro.
Luring out All for One and all the pro heroes cornering him.
Aizawa's assassination. His father teleporting everyone away. He and Izuku fighting against Afo. Mirko. No! He let out a cry. He remembered now, and he realized why he could not recall his memories right away. It was as if his brain was unconsciously trying to protect himself by making him forget that she died. Mirko was dead, killed at the hands of All for One. Usagiyama Rumi, his mentor, his role model, his best friend, and his lover. He thought that they would be together forever. Whether it was in his past or current life, he had never loved any other girl the way he loved Rumi. It was unlike him to lose himself to despair and grief, but at that moment he could not stop the tears that filled his eyes.
His fox ears twitched again as his sensitive hearing caught the sound of a doorknob being turned.
Looking back to see who opened the door, Naruto became mute with surprise, stupefied. For a second, he thought that his eyes were playing tricks on him. He looked at the newcomer's face dumbly, unable to utter a sound. Their round and soft face, their red eyes, filled with unshed tears, their long silvery hair, their wide smile and pearly white teeth, their dark skin and long rabbit ears. It was none other than Rumi. A gust of wind came, and with it Naruto found himself hoisted up to his feet and engulfed in a back-breaking hug. His arms wrapped around her back just as tightly. "Rumi!" Even as Naruto felt Mirko's tears wetting the nape of his neck, he heard her laughing as she said,
"Yes, Naruto, it's me."
He too buried his face in her hair, unable to say a word more. He hugged her for all she was worth. Even 5 minutes later, he was not letting go of her, holding on to her as if she were his lifeline. Eventually, they broke their hug, only partially, just so they could gaze into each other's eyes. Naruto leaned into her touch when she cupped his cheek with her hand.
Their eyes were puffy from crying, and their faces were still wet from their tears, but they were smiling. Normally, neither Naruto nor Mirko were the type to express their emotions like that. But, at that moment, they didn't try to put up a strong front. Finally regaining some of his calm and composure, Naruto took notice of Kushina and Minato, his parents, who were watching him and Mirko from the door, their reunion having moved them to tears too.
Then he saw her too, the very person responsible for this miracle, the one whom he would have to thank for the rest of his life for giving Rumi back to him. Letting go of Mirko, Naruto walked to Irai and kneeled in front of her, taking her in his arms.
"Eri-chan, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you." He could not easily put into words just how grateful he was. All he could do was take her breath away with his hug and repeat those words again and again.
"Don't cry, Ani-chan. You took me in when nobody wanted me. You gave me parents and a home. You saved me before. Now, it was my turn to save you." It was as if her words had been some sort of signal, because Kushina, Minato, and Mirko all rushed at them and joined in a big group hug.
It had been a trying time for the Uzumaki family. Minato had almost lost his life, and Mirko had definitely died. However, they were all safe now. They were together. They were alive.
While later, finally getting his emotions under control, Naruto went to the bathroom to clean himself. He splashed cold water on his face half a dozen times before he finally noticed that he was not alone in the bathroom. "Yeah!" he yelled, the fur on his 9 tails standing up like needles.
That's because, to his right, in the bathtub, a small crimson-furred fox was floating lazily on the water amidst bubbles, his 9 fluffy tails spread like a peacock on the water's surface.
"Pipe down, will you?" Kyuubi said in annoyance, not bothering to even open his eyes to look at Naruto. "But, what? How?" Naruto said in disbelief. "Not now, Naruto. Shoo, let me be, we'll talk later." Unbothered, moisturized, happy, in his lane, focused, flourishing. As he floated lazily amidst bubbles, Kurama was like the living embodiment of that meme. Watching the tiny fox cub chilling in the bathtub, Naruto didn't know whether to laugh or to cry. He was getting one surprise after another. At last, a few hours later, Naruto caught up with the events that had transpired after the battle. He had been unconscious for 2 days, but while he was sleeping soundly, the world was thrown into chaos by All for One's death and Kyuubi's emergence. His parents were not unfamiliar with Kyuubi since Naruto had revealed his existence to them before, but they had never expected the fox to become his own person. And they had definitely never expected him to turn into a behemoth that dwarfed even the likes of Mount Lady and Gigantomachia. If that was not enough to shock them, Kyuubi surprised them once again by showing that he was capable of altering his size at will, and becoming smaller too. "Did he hurt you in any way?" he asked his parents. When all was said and done, in the end, Minato and Kushina had been Kyuubi's jailers in their past lives. "You worry too much," Irai laughed. "Other than stealing Daddy's cans of Coca-Cola and demanding from us that we pet and brush his tails, Kurama did nothing but sleep and eat." "If I didn't know any better, I'd think he was a cat," Minato said too, chuckling. Naruto's relief was palpable. It was as if a weight was lifted off his chest. "By the way, what's with the crowd around our house?" "They're here because of you and Kurama," Mirko answered. Kurama in particular shook up the world. Our fight against All for One was televised from the moment Aizawa was killed. Everyone saw Kurama becoming as large as a skyscraper, and they also heard him talk to Izuku, too. He's different from anything anyone has ever seen, and you basically gave birth to him all alone. He is a new person, someone who was brought to life out of your quirk. It's not only the regular people who want to know more. People from the government and researchers and scientists from all over the country want to meet him too. The only reason they haven't done that so far is because Kurama said he would not talk to anyone without you. "Should we run away?" asked Naruto. Minato ruffled his hair, chuckling. "Sure, we can escape, but what then? Where would we escape to? And how long would we manage to stay hidden when you're sporting 9 tails? Rumi-chan has rabbit ears, and Kurama-san is a talking fox. Besides, we have no reason to run away. We have done no wrong. It's the opposite. You, Rumi-chan, and Kurama-san are heroes." "Don't downplay the part you played too, dear," Kushina said, pecking her husband on the cheek and making him smile.
As she sat on the sofa next to him, Mirko laid her head on Naruto's shoulder, and her hand reached out to his, their fingers automatically intertwining.
Kushina and Minato, involuntarily, smiled at the two loverbirds' non-verbal display of affection. At that moment, Kurama walked into the living room with his 9 furry tails wrapped into 9 towels, and wearing another towel around his waist. Like a human? His appearance was so funny that Naruto burst into laughter at the sight of him. But the fox ignored him and jumped into little Aries' lap, who swooned at being granted the honor of holding him in her lap. The tiny fox was just adorable. "By the way, where is Kuro?" Naruto asked, suddenly realizing that their German shepherd dog was nowhere to be seen.
"We asked the Russells to take care of him for a few days. Kurama's appearance almost gave him a heart attack. The poor dog is too terrified to be in the same house with him."
Kyuubi let out a snort but didn't say anything, feeling too comfortable in the girl's lap as she gently scratched him behind his ears. Kyuubi's appearance turned out to be a far bigger deal than Naruto had expected. 2 weeks after the war against All for One in Japan, Naruto and Kurama had gone through dozens of medical tests and psychological examinations, as the medics and scientists tried to understand just how it was possible for Naruto to give birth to an entirely new and independent being through his quirk.
Furthermore, that was not even the most difficult part. Much to the fox's chagrin, the government of the United States forced him to register as a citizen of Japan and become part of human society.
That meant that he was supposed to go through compulsory education as all children do. And worst of all, he had to get a birth certificate. "Hey, son, give me that bag of chips," came Naruto's voice. He was lying in bed together with Rumi and watching a movie. "Screw you, Naruto," Kyuubi barked at him, his growl filled with annoyance. Naruto snickered in schadenfreude. He was never going to let the fox live it down. He would forever poke fun at the fact that Kyuubi's birth certificate looked like this. Place of birth: Tokyo, Japan. Nationality: Japanese. Name: Uzumaki Kurama. Sex: male. Father's name: Uzumaki Naruto. Kyuubi elongated one of his tails to slap Naruto with it, but a golden chain sprung up, parrying it. "How dare you raise your hand against your father?" Naruto shouted at him in fake outrage. "Don't make me do it, Naruto! I'll fight you!" I'll seriously beat the snot out of you. Kyubi growled, and the bed creaked under his weight as his size quickly started increasing.
However, as 3 golden chains wrapped around his body, Kurama's size returned to that of a tiny cub again. The adamantine sealing chains worked on him in the present life just like they did in the previous life too.
But while Kyubi was steaming with annoyance, Eri came to his rescue. Moom! Nii-san is bullying! Kurama-san again, he shouted. Moom! With their sensitive hearing, Naruto and Mirko both heard the long-suffering sight that Kushina let out downstairs. Yellow flash illuminated the semi-darkness of the bedroom as Minato teleported into their room. Good grief. When will you stop teasing him? Minato said with his hands on his waist. As Naruto retrieved his chains, Eri rushed to take Kurama in her arms. Then, she stuck her tongue out at Naruto and made a sound before running back to her bedroom with the fox in tow.
Naruto chuckled at the way Kurama let the little girl carry him around like that. The old grump may have liked to claim otherwise, but he was a big softy deep inside.
As his father disappeared with another yellow flash, and with Kurama and Eri gone too, Naruto was left alone with Rumi in the room.
He sighed in comfort as the rabbit girl snuggled closer to him, half of her body draped over his now. Slowly running his hand along her waist and hips, Naruto smiled and kissed the top of her head lovingly.
Rumi too returned his affection by raising her head and kissing his neck. Things were still not perfect. Although All for One had been defeated and Principal Nezu, together with Izuku and the rest of the surviving pro-heroes, returned to Japan. Trying to reinstate order, the damage dealt by the Liberation Army's propaganda could not be undone right away. The evil deeds of the former HAPSC had been brought to light, and the many faults of the previous regime had been exposed and demonized. Many average people no longer trusted heroes. But just as many wanted the Civil War to be over and for things to return to how they used to be.
Therefore, that's how the present came to be. Currently, Japan was in the middle of an election, a referendum whose results would decide whether the pro-hero system and Hero Public Safety Commission were going to be reinstated or not. In spite of the chaos and tumult in his native country, Naruto was not affected. He had already done more than most people ever did for Japan. He had done his part.
He was in the United States now with his parents. From now on, all he wanted was to take it easy and enjoy his time with his family. And Mirko was the same. Previously, she had been adamant about returning to Japan and fighting for her country. However, after dying at the hands of All for One, her perspective changed. She did not want to be apart from Naruto anymore. Life was too short and too precious for them to spend their time apart. When the rabbit girl threw her leg over him and straddled him completely, thoughts of Japan's social unrest and political instability vanished from Naruto's mind. Line removed. Line removed. The end.